All right, guys, more Bassmaster Classic fallout, right? I mean, there's tons of stuff on social media. What would it be without everyone giving their takes about the Bassmaster Classic, just like this schmuck on YouTube? But this one's a little serious, okay? Because it involves a very serious topic, and that is fish mortality. Now, we have to understand that in today's day and age, everyone begins with a narrative, okay? And so, you know, the circumstances surrounding the Bassmaster Classic on the surface. So let me start by saying this. I have been very, very critical of Bass, obviously, in the last 2 years on this channel. You guys know that. That's not new to you. Been critical for MLF, the DQs, the cheating, the different scenarios, okay? But I try to pick my spots, right? I try to pick my targets, topics, and spots, okay? And this is a serious one. Okay, because fish mortality, tournament mortality, and the impacts of tournament fishing is something that's being studied. Okay, it's currently being studied by biologists and by a lot of state agencies. It is. And it's important for people who fish in the community to understand that and understand what may or may not be coming down the pipe. Okay, I'm just saying because there is pushback. It doesn't help, though, when people like Randy Blaukat and people like that begin with the end in mind, where all they want to do is tear down bass, you know, and potentially anyone else who allows forward-facing sonar, for example, as somehow filling that into the narrative of anti-forward-facing sonar, and try to pull tournament mortality into that. Now, tournament mortality is certainly a conservation discussion. I think you should check out Mark Fisher Outdoors' video on this topic as well, because you want to have balance to different people's perspectives that are actually they're thinking critically about it, and they're starting from a baseline of, okay, what happened, you know, how can we do better, you know, what's the next logical step, what are these things, and everybody's focusing on all the negative aspects of things pertaining to the Bassmaster Classic, like, for example, that the weigh-in wasn't at Ray Roberts. And that because the weigh-in wasn't at Ray Roberts, the fish may have been stressed more or less, okay? In terms of having to transport them down I-35, down to Fort Worth, have them weigh in at the convention center, and then take them back to Ray Roberts. And people have talked about, oh, it's like a 12, 13, 14-hour day, and, you know, and all that. And I understand all that, and that's all great, okay? But the reality of it is these things are approved ahead of time. You're not going to hear that on any other channel because it's just a fact. It's not juicy. It's just a reality that they got approval for their event in consultation with Texas Wildlife, okay? And this is what happens with tournaments. These are the studies that have gone on for 20 and 30 and 40 years about tournaments. What's an acceptable mortality rate, okay, for an event? Remember, this event didn't have 250 anglers in it, guys. This event had 56. And it didn't have 56 for 3 days. It had 56 for 2 days, okay, and then 25 for the last day, okay? So keep that in mind when you hear all this, people putting this in the context of 200 to 250 boats with 5 bass in the live well going, it's not what happened, okay? They get approval for these things. These things are already discussed when they pick these sites, okay? In terms of what's going to happen, where the weigh-in's going to be, what the anticipated fish catch rate is going to be, what the anticipated mortality rate is. These things are already done. Bass has a conservation arm to it in defense of bass. Most tournament series do not. And I dare say your local series, your regional series, they don't, okay? So they're winging it, all right? But they do have their weigh-ins lakeside, reservoir side, or on the river, and they can just put them right back in, right at the weigh-in. This one's a little different because it's the Classic, okay? And so you want to have a bigger venue, and they want to have that. Sure, they could have done it at the lake. Absolutely, okay. But they couldn't have the expo there unless it would have been an outdoor expo. And if they had an outdoor expo at Lake Roberts with 20-mile-an-hour winds, what do you think would have happened? People would have complained about the outdoor expo and what a disaster it was, and they should have had it indoors and blah, blah. Okay, that's just, again, narrative yarning that happens in the fish community these days because that's all what people have to do. That's the time that they have to do. I'm guilty of it. I admit it. I'm a schmuck on YouTube. I talk about all these things. I think about all these things. I have discussions with these things on the phone and in person, at the ramp, at the pub, all with people. Okay? That's the reality. All right? But let's break down Bassmaster Classic, okay? Just so we can just so you can have another perspective to put on top of what you're going to hear from Randy Blaukat, okay, and people like that are anti-forward-facing sonar. Because this doesn't really have anything to do with forward-facing sonar, okay? There have been plenty more events that have caught more fish than this, okay, in the history of MLF and Bass, and the Bassmaster Classic, by the way. You know what I'm saying? That over the course of history that have caught more fish than this, have resulted in more mortality than this, but because we live in the forward-facing sonar bashing era, okay, of the new technology, depending on where you fall on that, this is what we're doing now, okay? Okay, so let's do it, right? Let's break it down. We had 56 anglers fish the Bassmaster Classic, as I said. We had 31 fish for 2 days, okay, and they were done, and then we had 25 fish for a third day, okay? The top 25 anglers who fished the championship day, okay, the last day, in total, for 3 days, they caught 325 bass, okay? Okay? So, it's pretty simple math, okay? If you caught a 5 bass limit for 3 days, okay, which most of those guys did, okay? Some of them got in with a little less than a 5 bet limit, okay? They were in, they made the top 25. They made the cut, okay? Guys below the cut basically didn't catch, you know, 5 bass, 10 bass over 2 days. A lot of them, some of them did, just didn't have the weight, right? But that's how you do it, okay? So 31 didn't make the cut. So they only fished for 2 days. So of those 31 anglers, they caught about 148 to 150 bass, okay, in those 2 days. Remember, there were some guys who only caught 2 bass in 2 days, okay? You got to look at the track. You got to look at the board. You got to look at the results. You can't just assume everybody, oh, there's 56 anglers and everybody caught 15 bass in 3. No, that's not what happened. A lot of guys did not catch limits. A lot of guys only caught 1 or 2 bass on any given day. Some guys in the final day only came to the scales with 2 bass, remember? Okay? Again, these things matter if we're going to have a serious discussion of grown-ups. But again, if you begin with the whole purpose of you just want to use the topic, because I'm telling you, people like Randy Blaukat, they don't think you're smart, okay? It's shameful, actually. They think you're stupid. They think you're just Bubba and you're stupid. That's what they think. Stereotype. That's what he thinks. Because how he presents everything is like that. Like, wait, give people the actual juice. Like, give them the specifics. 56 anglers, okay? The top 25 caught 325 fish over 3 days. The bottom 31 who did not make the cut caught about 150 fish over 2 days, okay? So if you take the stated tournament accepted mortality rate in the country, which is 10%, by the way, what are you left with? You're left with about 46 fish that died over 3 days. And we'll just round it up to 50. So if 50 fish died during the Bassmaster Classic, okay, there are going to be people who are going to say, well, that, of course, that's bad. Of course, we don't want to kill fish, especially big fish in Texas, right? But then let's look at what we're talking about, Texas, right? Like, okay, one of the best states in the entire country in terms of management, fish population management in the country. Why are bass so big in Texas? It's not all about the strain. It's not, guys. It's about how those lakes are all being managed, okay? Their population densities are being managed. How do you do that? Agencies do that through various mechanisms and pulleys, okay? Here's the major one. Just the number one pushback for Randy Blaukat. If you go down to Texas and you fish, you're allowed to catch 5 bass that are longer than 14 inches a day. You can sit on the bank at Ray Roberts or you can go out and you can catch 5 largemouth. And as a matter of fact, in the whole state of Texas, you can catch 5 largemouth bass, 5 smallmouth bass, 5 Alabama bass, 5 spotted bass, 5 Guadalupe bass. You can catch 5 14 inches or more bass every time you go to the lake and take it home with you. 5. So when we're talking about the mortality rate of 50 bass, okay, with roughly, even if we round up to 500, okay, bass being caught. 50 bass. Lost the mortality rate. And we want to die on that hill. When it's a perfectly acceptable number, it's in the lower range. Now remember, let's talk about Texas. Texas has stated that studies have found that you will lose anywhere from 6% to 28% in a tournament field. And that's in a tournament field of 100 or more anglers. Okay? This only had 56 anglers. And it didn't have 56 anglers for the entire tournament. Okay? Got to keep that in mind. All right? Higher observation rate. So that range, 6 to 28. Why is that range so big? That range is so big is because they've conducted studies at different times of the year. When the water temperature is colder, like it is in March in Texas, the mortality rate of the bass declines to the lower range. In the summer months, it increases. Okay? So your factors for tournament mortality of bass are water temperature, tournament size, live well conditions. Okay, the Bassmaster Elite Series and the Bass Pro Tour have some of the biggest requirements for live wells, and the live well technology is 10. You think forward-facing sonar technology is freaking just crazy? The new live well technology is crazy compared to 20 years ago and even 10 years ago. It is so much more advanced. Okay, so let's factor that in, and then of course handling stress. Now, the stress of being caught, held, weighed, and transported. That is something bass should probably take a look at in terms of, okay, the distance between, and plus there was an accident which caused the weigh-in to be 3 hours. We hear all that, and all that is just circumstance. You can't predict stuff like that, and stuff just happens. Okay, it is. If you've ever run an event, if you've ever hosted a party, you run out of food, right? You run out of beer. So you try to plan it, but it inevitably always happens. Stuff happens, okay? I'm not going to sweat bass over an accident they had no control over. Not going to sweat bass over a 3-hour weigh-in. Did it suck? Yeah, but we all still watched, okay? We get it. If you want to bitch about that, bitch about that. Like, I'm like, come on, man. Not in their control. Okay? But Texas Wildlife knew about this situation. Okay? The biologists knew about this situation. Biologists were in place at the Bassmaster Classic. Okay? So Randy's not really telling you all about that stuff because that doesn't really fit his narrative. He wants to use the things that support his narrative of forward-facing sonar are very, very bad. Very, very bad. Okay? And so, but he doesn't want to point out the things that, are reasonable, right? And okay, well, what was the mortality? How many? Is it really? So think about this, guys. If bass lost 50 fish over 3 days due to stress and handling stress and transportation and all of that, how many bass do you think are caught and taken from a lake on any given weekend in Texas? Or maybe even in your state? How many bass do you think are taken out of a lake on any given day in Texas? Is it any different than that? I'm shocked. Actually, these numbers are low, guys. These numbers are low. Okay? And so people try to blow it up for their own narratives, and it's just not true. Yes, bass should probably, for future tournaments, depending on state regulations, okay? Every state is different, guys. We live in a federal system where every state has its own regulations and own laws when it comes to this stuff. very well could be different in Tennessee next year. Okay, they may not let them, but 2 years ago they allowed them to have it at the University of Tennessee, okay, which was close to the river, right? Fair enough. All right, so every state has its own parameters set here, okay? So Texas was well aware of this, well aware of the economic development, well aware of the economic impact for their city, well aware of all the money that would come to Texas, people traveling, people coming and spending money in Fort Worth. And it, like everything else, it's about money. It's balancing act between the economic development forces versus the conservation forces. And sometimes they're aligned and sometimes they're in conflict. I can see why people think that it was a bad idea, but it was an acceptable idea, an acceptable premise when they did the scheduling, and it was permitted and it was approved, knowing, okay, what is an acceptable mortality rate for this event with 56 anglers? Okay? I guarantee you, when I pick up the phone and I call the guy that I called down at Texas Wildlife, he's going to tell me that that's a low number, that they anticipated more than that, actually. Okay? So I just want you guys to get that, understand that when you hear these narratives, dive a little deeper. They're not going to provide you all. They're going to provide you just enough to get you riled up and to bring you over into the even though forward-facing sonar had nothing to do with this. Okay? This would have happened in any event that didn't have forward-facing sonar, that had the same distance between and the number of fish caught. Okay? NPFL could have the same exact situation happen if they had a weigh-in that wasn't right at the lake. Okay? So don't let them conflate these things. They're not related. They're not. So just keep that in mind. The average lake sees hundreds of bass in Texas taken out of it every weekend, every day, Saturday and Sunday, maybe during the week. I mean, you're allowed 5, okay? So think about that. So 10 anglers, 10 bank anglers at your local lake taking 5 fish out of your local lake was the equivalent of this event over 3 days. Okay? And I encourage you, go to Bassmaster and look at the catches. Look how many bags, how many fish were caught over the 3 days. You can go on the Bass Track, is probably still up. You can go on the leaderboard and look. How many people? The winning angler caught 15 bass over 3 days, Eastern Fothergill, and won the event. And just go straight down, and you'll see. Okay? And then understand that 10%, maybe 12%, based on the water temperature, based on the handling, based on these guys are really good taking care of fish. Okay? Based on all that. Even if you went to 15%, okay, it's just still not a bad event for fish mortality. These things happen in tournament fishing, okay? I mean, they just do. We want to do our best to return all the fish back safely to the water, but it just doesn't happen. We know what happens every time a hook gets taken out of a bass's mouth, okay? I mean, all these things factor into the play, okay? So that's it, guys. 56 anglers, roughly 500 plus fish caught, okay, over 3 days. Mortality rate, 10 to 15%, 50 bass died. If that, we don't know. Could it be more? Could be, okay. But again, this one, is just narrative yarning, guys, and it's really not. It would be a much, much bigger, if it was a bigger issue than certain people are trying to make it be about to fit it into their narrative, you'd be hearing a lot more things from the scientific and biology community, and you'd probably see a lot more outrage in the Texas General Assembly or House of their legislature and all that stuff, but you're not gonna, because this event actually was within the range of acceptable loss for tournament fishing. And I encourage Randy to inform his audience, what is his acceptable loss? What percentage of bass has he contributed to mortality rate in all the tournaments? He used to fish for bass, remember? He fishes for MLF now. He has fished a lot of BFLs. Okay? How many bass has he taken to a weigh-in over his career, do that math. Over his career, how many based on the mortality rate have actually died? Okay? It's all something we should all be concerned about and should think about. Okay? It is. About how to make it better. And I believe the technology is making it better. I believe the live well technology is making it better. I believe the fish handling practices that are now being employed at the weigh-ins are a lot more better for the fish than what they used to be. There are a lot of things that are going on that Bass is doing right. And we need to freaking acknowledge all the things that Bass is doing right. At the same time, if we're going to be critical of Bass and the things that we think they're not doing right, or they're falling short, or they should do better, right? I don't think this is one of them. I think this is actually a commendable tournament in terms of mortality based on what I'm reading and the people I've already talked to, given the circumstances of, that accident and that long weigh-in in those things. I don't think all the other criticisms around the event should fall into this discussion with this specific thing. I think this is important and should be taken on its own. And I think Bass deserves a little bit of props for the fact that it's coming in at the lower range of a lot of other events. And a lot of that stems from the fact that it is a reduced field. So they can get away with it a little bit more with a reduced field as opposed to having 250 anglers and, a 28% mortality rate, right? And guys are down on a Texas lake just freaking, crushing them. That study, by the way, pertaining to that range was done on Rayburn, okay? And so Rayburn is a predominant Texas, bass factory that gets scheduled by tournaments all the time, okay? So that study's pretty substantial in terms of relevance here, because it is a highly fished lake in which that study was done over the course of a year or so with different events for them to determine, that range for mortality. But that's all I got for you guys on this one. Again, much to do about nothing in my opinion, just narrative yarning. But it is an important topic, and we must pay attention to it. Just check out some of the other videos on YouTube. Like I said, Mark Fisher Outdoors is one of them. Go and watch Randy's video. I don't care. Go and listen to what his take is on it, and just balance that with everybody else's opinions and facts, okay, of relevance to make up your own mind. Because that's what it's about in the community. It's about informing people. It's about keeping people informed so they can make really good decisions. It's not about trying to beat someone over the head with a narrative because you want them to come to your camp or you want them to believe what you believe. I want you to believe what you believe, okay? You can certainly differ with my opinion. A lot of people do, and that's perfectly okay with me. And you can reach out to me. My email's in the description if you want to have a conversation about any of these topics, anything that I'm discussing, or if you have insight, or if I'm wrong. If you have more data or another study or whatever to point me in a direction to, let me know. I'll read it, okay? Because it's important. That's what YouTube is for. I see it as more of a platform to inform, okay? Not persuade, okay? Inform. There's a difference.